In 1827, Colonel Snelling withdrew the garrison from Fort Crawford. It was then that Chief Redbird led a war party into Prairie du Chien, attacking and scalping the Guenier family. Until military help could arrive, Marsh organized a defense of Prairie du Chien. John took command of the deserted fort and armed every civilian that could fire a gun. Even the women, including Marguerite, shouldered muskets. But still, Marsh led only some 90 souls, defending an outpost surrounded by thousands of increasingly hostile Winnebagoes. In the end, however, Marsh held the fort until the regular army arrived. Redbird surrendered, and the frontier waited in an uneasy calm for the next crisis. And a crisis there soon would be. Meanwhile, Marsh, as Indian sub-agent, struggled to keep the peace. At great personal risk, Marsh retrieved Guenier's dried scalp from an Indian graveyard. Alone, John then rescued a kidnapped pregnant Sioux woman and her child from the camp of a Fox war chief. He removed white trespassers from Indian lands, but the frontier remained a powder keg, ready to explode. But at that moment, John Marsh was dismissed. Joseph Street, the new Indian agent, was jealous of Marsh as a potential competitor. Street was also upset that an educated white man and U.S. government representative would openly take an Indian woman for a wife. Street's complaints, both trivial and imaginary, to Indian Commissioner General Clark and John Eaton bore fruit. By June 1829, John was supporting Marguerite and little Charles as a storekeeper in Prairie du Chien, trading with the Indians. In the spring of 1830, Street asked representatives of the Sauk and Fox tribes to meet with him in Prairie du Chien. The Sioux, traditional enemies, ambushed the Fox party, then paraded through Prairie du Chien, waving bloody trophies. After this embarrassing debacle, Street attempted to blame Marsh and his Indian wife Marguerite for tipping off the Sioux. However, contemporaries of Marsh wrote at the time that everyone in Prairie du Chien knew of the approaching group of Sauk and Fox representatives. For a year, the frontier boiled with revenge killings. In 1831, Marsh finally moved his small family downstream to New Salem, Illinois, to escape the growing violence. There, Marguerite and little Charles met a young Abraham Lincoln and stayed with the Pantier family until a pregnant Marguerite, desperately homesick, abandoned Charles to the Pantiers and returned to Prairie du Chien alone and on foot. Exhausted, but home at last, Marguerite and her newborn baby girl died in John's arms. Even before John Marsh had finished grieving for Marguerite, the U.S. government asked him for help. General Atkinson asked John to recruit Sioux warriors as allies in the fight against the Sauk under Chief Black Sparrowhawk, known today as Black Hawk. John and his friend Chief Warbashaw raised some 200 Sioux warriors. But John Marsh spent most of the war using his frontier skills, carrying military dispatches through the enemy-occupied wilderness. Chief Black Hawk was eventually trapped against the east bank of the Mississippi River. There his band of nearly 700 men, women, and children were slaughtered as they tried to cross the Mississippi for home. Only 150 souls survived the massacre. Sadly, the peace treaty was equally disastrous for the Indians. Again, the wild frontier moved westward, and John Marsh followed, seeking his fortune and his destiny.